proudly weaponized and using the DOJ to pursue the president's personal and political vendettas. When it comes to law enforcement, this is the very definition of corruption. One thing is clear. That is a scary abuse of power. Now to the weaponization of the DOJ. But you know what? That phrase actually doesn't do justice to what's happening. It's actually the corruption of the DOJ. Good people like Attorney General Pam Bondi and Deputy Todd Blanch, and I do believe, by the way, both of them were good people, good lawyers, public servants, who've now been coerced into trying to find cases to bring against the president's perceived enemies. And we know that not because of, some reporting behind the scenes. We know that because the president has been publicly calling for, demanding that people like James Comey, Letitia James, Adam Schiff be investigated and prosecuted. And now, a new target. The well-respected Republican, Trump-appointed FBI Director Christopher Wray. President Trump, in an interview Sunday with NBC News, accusing the former director of, quote, inappropriate behavior during his tenure, and said he would think the Justice Department is investigating him. Quote, I would certainly imagine, I would think they're doing that. I think it's very inappropriate what he did, Trump said. And I think a lot of his service was very inappropriate, but we haven't gone beyond that. Don't forget, we just found out about all these FBI agents being there. He's referring to being there as an apparent reference to the ridiculous accusation Trump posted on Saturday, alleging that the FBI, quote, secretly placed against all rules, regulations, protocols, and standards 274 FBI agents into the crowd just prior to and during the January 6th hoax, end quote. Except even loyalist Kash Patel has corrected him, claiming the agents were brought in to do crowd control after things got out of hand. So what's happening now is honest public servants like Chris Wray are now the prey. People like him are too honest, and therefore they're too dangerous to Trump. He's a Republican, unwilling to bow to every conspiracy theory, and he's now targeted. And by the way, this is what happened with a Trump-appointed Republican U.S. attorney in Virginia, pushed out because he wouldn't allow himself to be corrupted. He led the Comey and James investigations and didn't believe there was enough evidence to charge. Neither, apparently, did the line prosecutors who worked for him. And that should come as no surprise, since whatever the details are of the Comey case, whoever he supposedly authorized to leak about a Hillary Clinton investigation, it was already investigated during the first Trump administration. And it's been reinvestigated now by the person who just got forced out. And it was found to be insufficient to charge. We know this because the statement at issue was Comey just reiterating something he'd said in 2017. Now you have Bondi and Blanch putting out ridiculous statements trying to pretend like this is normal course of business. Quote, no one's above the law nonsense. And then she said this on Fox Friday night, telling us in the same sentence that weaponization by the DOJ is over. And then she also says she is prepared to weaponize the DOJ to go after Trump's enemies.
Donald Trump is in office and the weaponization has ended. We've made that very clear. Whether you're a former FBI director, whether you're a former head of an intel community, whether you are a current state or local elected official, whether you're a billionaire funding organizations to try to keep Donald Trump out of office, everything is on the table. We will investigate you and we will end the weaponization. No longer will there be a two-tier system of justice. And we are working hand in hand, Director Patel and I, Todd Blanch, with our incredible intel community, Tulsi Gabbard, John Radcliffe, going nonstop around the clock. People will be held accountable.
So the weaponization's over. You got that part, right? This comes after the raid at John Bolton's home. And as we also learned, the DOJ is also investigating now Fulton County, Georgia DA Fonnie Willis, who led the criminal charge against Trump for trying to overturn the 2020 election. And as the Justice Department seeks to go after the liberal George Soros Open Society foundations. And it comes on the heels of the Trump administration firing dozens of highly qualified prosecutors and support staff for the sin of having been assigned to work on January 6 cases. Many people asking me now, Dan, do you regret supporting Pam Bondi's nomination for Attorney General? The answer is no. Because if it hadn't been her, one thing we know for certain is that it would be someone who would bend a knee to Trump. If they didn't, they would be out. Now, am I disappointed that she and Todd Blanch aren't standing up to him? Absolutely. But we know what would happen if they did. He would do what he did in Virginia. He would fire them. Who can hold him accountable for that? And more importantly, who can help somehow try to put an end to this madness? Well, top Republican leaders ought to be stepping up. It seems they won't. The ones that are the most disappointing are the ones who are not even running for re-election, like Senators McConnell and Tom Tillis in North Carolina and Joni Ernst. But this is also about the right-wing media, and most of them seem completely unwilling to abide by the basic norms and rules that would apply to anyone but Donald Trump. They are scared. They're scared of Trump. They're scared of losing audience. Look, all of this is despite the fact that investigations have been launched of people Trump feels have just wronged him. It's not even people who went after him in many cases. I mean, think about Chris Krebs, right? The former head of cybersecurity, who had the gall to say the 2020 election was fair. The White House even released a statement about him, calling him a significant bad faith actor who weaponized and abused his government authority. His, quote, weaponization? Here's the quote. That he falsely and baselessly denied that the 2020 election was rigged and stolen, including by inappropriately and categorically dismissing widespread election malfeasance and serious vulnerabilities with voting machines. But this is truly insane stuff. And in an effort to rewrite history, we need to make sure this does not become normalized. And by the way, it's not just about the DOJ. Watchdogs have been fired in numerous departments to ensure that there's little to no oversight. And it feels like we've already forgotten the criminal referral from the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, over President Obama and many in his administration. They said, engaging in a, quote, seditious conspiracy with the Trump-Russia investigation. Now, I've previously explained how and why that claim is total BS. That Gabbard has intentionally conflated one issue, whether voting machines were compromised by the Russians in the 2016 election, a claim that no top Obama officials ever determined was true, with the verifiable claim that the Russians tried to impact the 2016 election in favor of Donald Trump. Knowing the Obama team only concluded the second one, the latter one, she kept falsely claiming that they somehow changed their position based on pressure from top officials. Except the Obama administration view, well, it was some back and forth, but it's been stunningly consistent as far as the intel goes. Yes, Russia tried to meddle. They did so in favor of Donald Trump. Look, they hacked the DNC and top Clinton officials. They released it under a fake name. They put out ads against her. It's not an open question. It's true that in the primary, they favored Bernie Sanders, but it's 100% truth the Russians tried to help Trump in the general election. Just read the Marco Rubio-led bipartisan Senate committee report, in addition to all the other DOJ investigations and the detailed Mueller indictments. Not one, including the Durham investigation, concluded that the Russia investigation was political. But yeah, it feels like none of that matters. Which is why it makes sense now that the president is preparing to go after former Director Wray. After all, at a Senate hearing in 2023, he pointed out that as a, quote, lifelong Republican, the idea that he was leading a politicized FBI made no sense. Now Trump lumping him in with Comey. He says, that's two in a row, Comey and Wray, who got caught lying with our great country at stake. Anyone who is following this stuff and who is remotely sensible knows he's making this stuff up. And yet, the response from those who try to defend the president is always the same. The Biden, Obama, DOJs are the ones who started the politicization. So let's address that head on, as I've chronicled before, but this is too important. There were more investigations and prosecutions of high-profile Democrats than Republicans by the Biden DOJ. How many high-profile Republicans do you see this DOJ targeting? And I guess I should clarify that and say, how many high-profile Trump-supporting Republicans? I mean, even the Hunter Biden investigation, would this administration allow the DOJ to even investigate Eric Trump or Don Jr. if there was some claim of wrongdoing with, I don't know, crypto deals or something? Look, you can criticize Biden for the pardon, and I did, but Trump wouldn't allow an investigation and charges against his sons. Those trying to sucker you into believing that weaponization was rampant under Biden also cite the January 6th cases, claiming that many or most of the defendants got the books thrown at them when compared to other cases, particularly compared to the 2020 protesters in the wake of the death of George Floyd. Except that ignores key facts, like that there were tens of thousands of people protesting on January 6th, and yet only 1,600 of them got criminally charged. It's only that fraction who went inside the Capitol building or attacked officers. There were thousands more who went into the restricted perimeter on the Capitol grounds when the fencing and the barricades around it were breached, and who were not prosecuted, even though they technically violated the law. No one talks about them. But the biggest comparison that's made is to the summer of 2020 rioters. It's Trump's AG Bill Barr, who led the federal prosecutions. Thousands were arrested. And I've mentioned this article before. It's an important article, an Associated Press comparison of charges against January 6th protesters and BLM rioters, published in June of 2021, found, quote, in more than 300 federal cases stemming from the protests sparked by George Floyd's death, dozens of people have been convicted of serious crimes and sent to prison. More than 70 defendants got an average of about 2 years and 3 months behind bars. 10 received prison terms of 5 years or more. That's not even talking about the state charges, right? And I've said this before. I do think you can make an argument that the least culpable of the January 6th folks, some of them may have been overcharged. But the argument that the January 6th criminals were targeted while the summer rioters were not just doesn't hold up, and certainly doesn't justify the ridiculous political pardons and clemency for all the January 6th criminals. I mean, even the less splashy claims of politicization under AG Garland don't hold up, like the claim that the Biden DOJ supposedly targeted parents protesting at school boards. The main talking point there was a letter from the National School Boards Association in 2021 warning of threats to school board members and describing it as akin to, quote, domestic terrorism. The NSBA later apologized for the language, but here's the most important point. The Merrick Garland-led Justice Department never used that language or endorsed it. In fact, AG Garland said he disagreed with it. And an investigation determined there was no direct or indirect evidence that the administration requested the letter or specified or edited or reviewed the contents of it before it was sent. No parent was prosecuted by the DOJ as a domestic terrorist, not one. But of course, look, the biggest gripe is the prosecution of Donald Trump, right? This, they say, shows how the DOJ went after their political opponent. Now, problem with that is it completely ignores the reality that AG Garland initially refused to prosecute Trump for trying to overturn the election and for January 6th. Clearly didn't want to do it despite lots of complaining and pressure from the left. If he had done it in 2021, that case would have been resolved well before the election. What ultimately forced Garland's hand wasn't the left. It was the Trump team's lies about the classified documents at his home. Bottom line, Donald Trump never would have been prosecuted by the DOJ if he and his team had not lied about the sensitive documents he had at Mar-a-Lago. Unlike Joe Biden and Mike Pence, who gave full access to search and recover any documents, the Trump team had particularly sensitive ones, which they lied to the FBI about. Now, here's a critical point. They were asked for all documents with classified markings. So spare me the "he was president so he can declassify" argument. Whatever level of classification the documents had at the time, the Trump team promised there were no other documents marked classified. That was a lie. It was only then, in 2022, that Garland appointed an outside prosecutor to investigate, and also a Republican one to investigate Biden. Special counsel Jack Smith made the decision to prosecute for January 6th, not Garland. And the classified documents case isn't remotely comparable to anything Pence or Biden did. Now, I can tell you all of that and also tell you, again, that I've criticized the state cases against Trump. You can believe that local prosecutors like Alvin Bragg, Letitia James, and Fani Willis were politicized, as I do. Do I think Trump engaged in wrongdoing? Absolutely, particularly with the documents case. But I can also tell you with some degree of confidence that the Alvin Bragg and Letitia James cases in particular wouldn't have been brought if he wasn't Donald Trump. I don't think they were trying to hurt his election campaign. By the way, both actually helped him politically. But I do think both were trying to help themselves politically. But I also believe that Texas Republican AG Ken Paxton, as well as state attorneys general in Alabama and Kansas and Florida, have been wildly politicized, many trying to relitigate the 2020 election without any compelling evidence. But none of them is the DOJ or Biden or Obama. But it is a hallmark of this administration, proudly weaponized and using the DOJ to pursue the president's personal and political vendettas. When it comes to law enforcement, this is the very definition of corruption. It is worth repeating that every single FBI director in American history has been a Republican. One became independent, but not one Democrat, not one ever. So the argument that the Biden DOJ was weaponized and they started this, it just isn't backed up by the facts. And by the way, it was BS when the Democrats who were charged by the Biden DOJ alleged it. And there's a whole list of them, of Democrats who claimed that the Biden DOJ was out to get them for a variety of reasons. It's BS when the Republicans say it too. But the evidence that this DOJ is beyond weaponized is as clear as day. They sort of deny it, but then they don't. It seems their new definition of weaponization is only weaponization against the right. Weaponization against what they perceive as their enemies. Or the left? Well, that's justice. That is a scary abuse of power. One thing is clear. This is an administration using the enormous power of the federal government to go after Trump's enemies in a way the Biden administration never did. Kash Patel published the enemies list in a book. He told us. And by the way, this is where Trump does get some credit. He campaigned on this. He said he was going to do it. The Wall Street Journal editorial board was right. It's becoming clear that, quote, vengeance is a large part, maybe the largest part, of how Trump will define success in his second term. I've said this many times. That does not mean everything this administration does is bad. Just heard me say that I think that this administration is in a better place to potentially get peace in the Middle East than the Biden administration. But this is really, really important and really, really awful.